Good evening and welcome to Politics Nation. Tonight's lead, mask off. I want to start tonight with my thoughts on a racist video shared this week by President Trump depicting former President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama as apes. More than a year into his second term, Donald Trump has revealed yet again there's no limit to how low he will be willing to go. This is an image no other American president would have presented to the public. In fact, it is behavior one would expect from a president of the Confederacy, not the United States. The post was so bad, even Republicans like South Carolina Senator Tim Scott had to denounce it. But I was particularly moved by the words of House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries. Take a listen.
This disgusting video posted by the so-called president was done intentionally. Donald Trump and his vile, racist, and malignant behavior. This guy is an unhinged bottom feeder. President Obama and Michelle Obama are brilliant, caring, and patriotic Americans. They represent the best of this country.
Trump's post, which has now been deleted, is especially appalling coming during the opening days of Black History Month, as his administration has gone out of its way to erase and belittle the contributions African Americans have made to the nation. It is increasingly ominous that Trump should be reaching for the oldest and most odious of racist tropes as he talks of nationalizing elections in American cities with large black populations. And it is insulting he would try and blame this pathetic post on a nameless staffer, even though it came in the late hours of the evening. If someone else is responsible for this video, they should be identified and held accountable. If Trump himself made the post, he should apologize to the Obamas and make amends. But I won't be holding my breath. I'm focused on delivering a strong rebuke to Trump's vile and racist conduct at the one place that will hurt him the most, the ballot box come November. And that's where we start Politics Nation this evening. Joining me now is the governor of the state of Maryland, Wes Moore. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Governor. I have to start tonight. I have to start tonight with this Obama video and President Trump's insistence he has nothing to apologize for. What's your reaction on first seeing it, Governor?
Well, the reaction, just like everybody, was that this is not just racist and deeply offensive and disappointing, but not at all surprising. And I think, nobody was waiting for the president to apologize because he's not sorry. He's not sorry for the video. He's not sorry for putting it out. And we see because it just actually shows and it just highlights the fact that his policies have actually led to this point, that he has no problem reintroducing these racist tropes into the conversation, because if you look at the policies that have happened just in the past year that he's been back in office, that we have seen the greatest assault on black female employment that we have seen in our nation's history, that we have seen an assault on MBE programs like the 8A, that we have seen the greatest assault on our HBCUs happen from this president. So nobody was holding their breath nor waiting for an apology from him, because once again, he shows not just by his words, but by his actions, he's not sorry.
Now, staying with that, Governor, Trump's behavior seems more erratic than ever. In addition to the ape video this week, he's claiming that Senate Democrats offered to rename major transit hubs after him in order to release billions of dollars for infrastructure projects here in New York, and that he froze last month. On top of that, he delivered that he's freezing Democrats out of annual governors' meetings at the White House, leaving them out of a working session and disinviting you and Colorado Governor Jared Polis specifically from a following dinner. How do you work with this guy on matters of life and death, Governor?
You know, I've been clear with the people of my state that I will work with anybody. I will just bow down to nobody. And it's obvious that the president has a problem with that. That I serve as the vice chair of the National Governors Association, a position that was decided by my peers, both Democratic and Republican governors, who've asked me to serve in this leadership role. And not only am I the vice chair, as you mentioned, the only black governor in this country, and somehow I was then told not to come to the White House. But, you know, I think about the way that he has treated Maryland since he's come back into office, where Maryland has not received a single dollar in federal disaster relief since the president has come back into office. And by the way, not a single state that did not vote for Donald Trump has. That we've seen how billions of dollars have been taken away from our balance sheet since Donald Trump has become the president of the United States again. So once again, this is par for the course by the way this administration acts and by the way this administration treats us as leaders.
Following the ICE surge in Minnesota and other states, your state legislature is taking up several bills to curtail federal law enforcement agencies' conduct in Maryland and passing legislation this past week to ban immigration agreements between local police and federal agencies. More bills are expected to come in time for your signature by the end of this Black History Month. The president has threatened to crack down on Maryland in the past, on crime in Baltimore specifically. Are you confident the state can push back if he decides to go through with it?
If the president actually cared about public safety, he should come to Maryland and learn and not come and lecture. Because we have seen how Maryland in the past 2 years since I've been the governor has had the fastest drops in violent crime anywhere in the United States of America. The violent crime rate in the state of Maryland is down nearly 50% since I put my hand on the Bible. And the truth is we have too much support and too much respect for our local law enforcement. We made historic investments in local law enforcement. They are trained, they are accountable. And to ask this agency, this Trump ICE agency, to then deputize our people who are trained and who are accountable, to then join an organization that is now the 13th largest military force in the world by funding, that is now, this law enforcement agency is now bigger than the FBI, bigger than the ATF, bigger than the DEA. And they are deploying people to our neighborhoods who are untrained, unqualified, and unaccountable. And so, no, we do not need their help in terms of focusing on violent crime. We will always work with our federal partners to make sure we're dealing with the issue of violent crime. But that's not what this Trump ICE force is doing. They are arresting 5-year-olds. They're arresting parents in pickup lines. And so if they want to do real work on addressing the issue of violent crime, they should come to Maryland and learn and not come to Maryland and try to dictate nor deputize our people on how to do their jobs. They're doing it quite well.
Now, I want to get to redistricting, but staying with that a minute, the Department of Homeland Security reportedly plans to build an ICE detention center in Central Maryland. And you wrote to the DHS Secretary Kristi Noem with several concerns about the project's impact on the region and the administration's relationship with your state so far. What are you worried about, Governor?
Well, it's amazing that the same department that somehow finds money to build facilities to house people can't find money to support our people in Western Maryland when they had historic floods. We're crying that they could not find the money to help our communities when they were dealing with floods that we had not seen in our state's history, but can somehow find money for warehouse facilities that are not accountable, that there was no coordination nor cooperation. And frankly, that we know, if you look at the history of DHS, that there can be very, very real human rights challenges that will exist. This is not economically smart, and this violates core values of morality and humanity that we think should be applied. And this has nothing to do with public safety. So I did reach out to Secretary Noem. I told her that we do not approve nor agree to this, and we are working with our Attorney General and working with local leadership to ensure that this does not happen.
Last year, you pushed Maryland to take up redistricting as a counter to GOP gerrymandering, the gerrymandering wave, really, that kicked off by Texas at the president's demand. Democrats in the Maryland House of Delegates just approved a new congressional map that, if approved by the state Senate, would erase the state's only Republican-leaning district. But the effort may face opposition in the state Senate, where some top Democrats aren't in favor. And I might add, to the chagrin of many that I've talked to, some of the ministers are really adamant about this. But as the president talks about nationalizing elections, what's your message to potential holdouts, Governor?
Well, I saw how just last week we saw how senators, Maryland senators, have spoken out about this. Just last week, Senator Arthur Ellis, who is a military veteran and who was unbossed, stood up to the entire body and said that they need to take this up. And he represents something that many Maryland senators feel, that in this moment, we're just asking the Maryland Senate to do what the Maryland House of Delegates did. Debate it, make adjustments if you see fit, but then take a vote. That is democracy. That is, I serve this country and I led soldiers in combat. We fought for democracy. And we're just asking the Maryland Senate to actually believe and defend democracy. Just last week, they took a vote. They debated and devoted and spent time and voted on who's going to win the Super Bowl. So I'm just simply asking, if you can find time in your schedule to debate and vote on who's going to win the Super Bowl, then maybe defending our democracy and what the future of our democracy should get the same airtime.
So let me be clear. They voted on who would win the Super Bowl, but will not bring up for a vote on a redistricting of congressional districts in the state of Maryland?
Somehow redistricting cannot get a vote, but who is going to win the Super Bowl could.
Well, before I go quickly, we're in the month, Black History Month, and you are our only black governor in the United States, and it's been floated that you may be a possible 2028 contender. In honor of Black History Month, and the fact that I've known you a long time, do you want to make some history tonight by letting us know if you intend to become the second black president?
I am looking forward to winning re-election in November and continuing to do the work here in Maryland. I mean, we got a great story to tell. We've had historic drops in violent crime. We've had unemployment rate go from 43rd in the country to then going to being one of the lowest, and watching how we're still below the national average. We have seen how we've been able to get more people employed, have innovative platforms like the service share option for all of our high school graduates, have an economy that's moving and the fastest growing population that we have seen in a decade. And so I know that while I'm the nation's only black governor, right now, I know part of our goal is I do not want to be the only title. I don't want to be the only one who has that title as well.
All right. Well, I'll take that as the door's open, but you're working behind the door to take care of Maryland first. You can't blame me for trying, you know. Thank you for being with us, Governor Wes Moore of Maryland. Now, let's turn to Minnesota, where community members gathered today in Minneapolis to honor the lives of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, both fatally shot by federal agents.
This is the darkest time I could imagine, but also the community has rallied in a way that just is absolutely mind-blowing and heartwarming, you know? The fact that we have showed up in this way and demonstrated a nonviolent way of protesting, you know, federal government tyranny, and there's no other word for it, you know. Our streets are occupied by masked thugs and goons doing whatever they want to do and shooting people.
Joining me now is Democratic Minnesota U.S. Senator Tina Smith. Senator, today is exactly 1 month since Renee Good's death. Earlier this week, the Trump administration promised to remove 700 federal law enforcement officers from Minnesota. However, still leaving roughly 2,000 agents in the state. Residents have reported that they've seen little sign of withdrawal. What's the mood in your state right now?
Well, I love that you showed, Reverend Sharpton, that big gathering of Minnesotans earlier today to celebrate the lives of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. And that sense of solidarity and coming together is still really prevalent. But people are also incredibly angry at this continued presence of these lawless federal agents. It's like this secret federal police force that is patrolling our streets. And a couple of nights nights ago, I guess it was Friday night, I spoke with Tom Homan and pressed him about when this Operation Metro Surge is going to end. It is a start that they have begun to remove some of these agents, but there is a long way to go. And as you said, there has really not been a noticeable change in the communities yet. I was in Rochester, Minnesota, which is about an hour and a half south of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And then I was in a suburb of Minneapolis, Fridley, on Friday. And there we still see ICE agents stalking schools and breaking the windows of people who are serving as observers to protect kids. So we have a long way to go before this is over.
Now, MS Now is reporting that federal prosecutors had a warrant to collect evidence from Renee Good's vehicle, but senior Trump administration officials, including FBI Director Kash Patel, put a stop to the investigation out of fear that pursuing a civil rights case could contradict the White House's claims that she was allegedly threatening the officer with her car or with her vehicle. What are your thoughts, Senator?
Well, this is incredible. So what's happening in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota shows how deep this corruption is. They were directed by Maine Justice, I believe, to not investigate what happened in the killing of Renee Good, and instead to train their prosecutorial and investigatory powers on investigating Renee Good's wife. Now, there are reports that they have pulled back from that, but the damage is done, Reverend Sharpton. There have been, I think, maybe up to 24 of these career prosecutors, non-political people in the Justice Department that have resigned. These are folks that were going after fraud cases. They were going after fentanyl trafficking. They were investigating and putting together the case to hold accountable the man who murdered Melissa Hortman and her husband. And that infrastructure for justice has been torn apart. They're not able to go after the worst of the worst because they have ripped that apart. And now they're focused on investigating our political leaders, and they're flooded with immigration cases because of the lawless way that they are arresting and detaining people who have done absolutely nothing wrong.
Senator, DHS funding expires in 6 days on February 13th. And Senate Majority Leader John Thune said Thursday that serious negotiations have yet to begin. A sizable number of your Democratic Senate colleagues reportedly haven't ruled out another short-term funding punt for the DHS. What's the true status of the negotiations as of now? And are you confident a potential agreement could satisfy the public, like your constituents, after so many have called for major reforms to immigration enforcement?
Well, I won't vote for a penny more for this lawless agency until we have real reform. And what Democrats put out last week was, just the beginning of expecting these ICE agents to follow the same kinds of protocols that your local police department would follow. And this has been dismissed by Republicans as being a wish list. And so I'd like to know what on this list they think is unreasonable. I think that we should go farther than what we have on this list. So it's not looking positive. And I am really hopeful that Democrats will not continue to fund this agency until we get meaningful reforms to stop the worst of the abuses. Because sooner or later, I do believe that they will draw down the federal troops that are in Minnesota, but then they're going to go someplace else, and it will become
the big lie for the midterms. What you need to know about President Trump's threat to nationalize elections. That's next on Politics Nation. Welcome back to Politics Nation. With the midterm elections just 9 months away, Democrats are sounding the alarm on President Trump's threat to nationalize elections. Take a listen to comments President Trump made on the topic during 2 separate interviews in just the past week.
The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting.
You've recently suggested nationalizing elections. What do you mean by that?
and I didn't say national, I said there are some areas in our country that are extremely corrupt. They have very corrupt elections. Take a look at Detroit. Take a look at Philadelphia. Take a look at Atlanta. There are some areas that are unbelievably corrupt. I could give you plenty of more, too.
Joining me now, Michael Waldman, President and CEO of the Brennan Center for Justice. Michael is a constitutional lawyer and author of The Fight to Vote. Michael, these comments follows Trump's FBI seizing 2020 ballots in Georgia and new reporting that Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, also investigated voting machines in Puerto Rico. How big of a concern is all of this? What would nationalizing voting even look like?
What we're seeing, Reverend, is a full campaign from this administration to undermine confidence in the election. Nationalizing, as Donald Trump seems to see it, is to use the power, the full power of the federal government to try to threaten election officials, to raid the offices in Atlanta using the FBI, to try to get sensitive voter information from states all over the country. That's not the appropriate role for the federal government. The Constitution is very clear. States run elections. Congress can and should pass strong national laws, but the president has no role.
Now, earlier this week, former Trump advisor Steve Bannon suggested a new assignment for ICE agents. Listen to this.
We're going to have ICE surround the polls come November. We're not going to sit here and allow you to steal the country again. And you can whine and cry and throw your toys out of the pram all you want, but we will never again allow an election to be stolen. But let's put you on notice again. ICE is going to be around the polls in the 2026 midterm elections.
Now we've already seen ICE's mission creep from deportations to monitoring or targeting to political resistance to its operations. Could the administration really use ICE to patrol polling places and engage in voter intimidation? I mean, what can be done to prevent this?
We've already seen the risk of how political ICE and the Border Patrol is. If you remember, when Governor Newsom and the Democrats in California announced their referendum on redistricting in that gerrymandering war, coincidentally, supposedly, a bunch of Border Patrol agents showed up armed right outside. It's a real risk. But here's the thing that Steve Bannon is ignoring. It is illegal under numerous federal and state laws to interfere with voting, even if you're ICE. And so courts would step in. I think local governments would step in, but voters need to know that they should be preparing to vote early, preparing to vote by mail, and not to be cowed by this kind of intimidation. I think it's a lot of bluster, but it's designed to scare people away. Not really the law, but a really un-American undermining of the democratic system.
How would they enforce this? How would this be enforced with ICE?
Well, if federal forces try to interfere with the elections in that way, there's a section of the Voting Rights Act that's still around that can be enforced, and state and local governments have the ability and indeed the duty to protect their polling places.
Now, recently, Republicans in Congress have begun pushing the SAVE Act again. Can you remind our audience what it is and how likely is it to pass?
So the SAVE Act is a really, I think, egregious voter restriction bill. What it says is that to register to vote, you effectively need to produce a passport or a birth certificate to register. And that is something at the Brennan Center, we've studied this. 21 million people at least don't have ready access to those documents. And that doesn't even count, for example, married women who've changed their names. It's all in search of this conspiracy theory that somehow there's lots of non-citizens voting, which, as you know, is just not true. And so the SAVE Act passed the House of Representatives, got to be stopped in the Senate, as has happened so far.
Now, before I let you go, we're still waiting, I should say, on the Supreme Court's decision on the Voting Rights Act. What are you expecting, and how could it impact the midterms?
Well, as you know, the Supreme Court has taken a sledgehammer to the Voting Rights Act over many years under John Roberts. There's a case, Louisiana versus Calais, where at least from the way they asked the questions and what they said in the oral argument, it looks like they're going to really potentially gravely weaken or really demolish the effectiveness of the Voting Rights Act. That could mean a real redistricting frenzy. It could mean a real difficulty in having representation for communities of color, especially across the South. And one of the questions is when this would happen. The closer it gets to Election Day, the less likely it is that it will take effect in this election. But there will be a huge fight involving civil rights groups, voting rights groups, and others to make sure that people get their representation and get their right to vote. And then we're going to need to fix it legislatively if the Supreme Court does its worst.
All right. Thank you, Michael Waldman of the Brennan Center. Coming up, Congress welcomes a new face to a historic House seat. More on the legacy and his plans for the future just ahead. Welcome back to Politics Nation on MS Now. Good week for Democrats in Texas this week. Taylor Remmett unexpectedly flipped a ruby red state Senate seat, defeating a candidate endorsed by Donald Trump. And after 7 months of vacancy, former Harris County Attorney Christian Menefee won a special runoff election to fill the late Representative Sylvester Turner's seat almost a year after his death. Menefee's win brings Dems' seats in the House to 214, just 4 seats shy of the GOP's, and potentially moving the needle on future votes. Joining me now is Christian Menefee, Democratic congressman from Texas. Congressman, you're finally in a position to make your promises into action. While you were on the campaign trail, what did you hear from people in your Houston district? How are you doing, and how are they doing on the Trump 2.0?
Well, thank you very much for having me on. I'll tell you, there were so many times when I was knocking doors and I expected to hear the things that you typically hear in politics. I knocked the door of an 80-year-old African-American woman, and as she was walking to the door, I thought to myself, maybe she's going to ask me about Medicare, about Social Security. And she looked at me and said, "Young man, what are you going to do about Donald Trump?" Folks across our community have been looking to send fighters up to Washington, D.C., folks who are going to work as hard as they can to hold the Trump administration accountable. And I think that's going to be a large part of the role that I hope to play in this Congress, is making sure that we're not just a minority party, but we're an opposition party.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott decided to delay the special election by 7 months, depriving your district of representation at a time when the GOP congressional majority is razor thin. Talk to me about this decision and how it impacted your constituents.
It was absolutely disgraceful. This same governor, Greg Abbott, has numerous times called emergency special elections to fill a vacancy when the district was a Republican district or it was a district that was winnable by Republicans. But because this was a deeply blue district that they knew that they couldn't win, he delayed this election. And when votes like the so-called Big Beautiful Bill was voted on, which passed by 1 vote, we had no representation. When Congress was deciding whether to cut SNAP benefits or make it more difficult to access Medicaid, we had no voice in Congress. I think what the governor did is absolutely despicable. And the fact that he would allow the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress to dictate how he acts with Texans, I think is very shameful. And I look forward to making sure that the entire country knows that he turned his back on the 18th congressional district.
Now, your win in the special election means you will finish out the remainder of Congressman Sylvester Turner's term. But despite just winning your seat, you now have to gear up for a primary in just a couple of weeks. And due to the Republican redistricting, one of those contenders will be longtime Houston Congressman Al Green. Have you thought much about that race?
Frankly, I've been doing everything I can to get the office up and running to ensure that a district that went nearly 11 months without a voice now has a working office, both in the district and in the halls of Congress. But I look forward to the primary campaign. We have so much energy, so much momentum, folks who chipped in a few dollars, who knocked doors for us, who sent text messages because they believe that I'm the best candidate to go up to Washington, D.C., to fight for their rights and to ensure that we bring real change to this country and we make our district a great place to live. So I think we're going to see success in this primary. But I want to be clear. I didn't ask for this. Congressman Green didn't ask for this. This was done by Republicans and by the governor of Texas. They pitted black leaders against each other. They have combined black and brown districts in order to strip us of our representation and hand it over to conservatives. I think it's horrible, and I plan to work as hard as I can. When I get going, when I really am able to get the ball rolling, I will happily support a bill to end partisan gerrymandering so that we don't see this type of activity ever again.
Democrats have been outperforming since Texas Republicans messed with the maps, as evidenced by the surprising state Senate win this week in District 9, where the Democratic candidate won a 14-point victory in an area Trump carried by 17 points. Are you encouraged by that?
I'm very encouraged. There is something brewing in Texas right now. There's an energy on the ground that we have not seen in a long time. When I got sworn in, we were getting calls from people across the state who were in tears that the legacy of the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, the late Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, was going to be continued. People are excited about a new fight that's going on. But the other thing that's going on is people are tired of the Trump administration's policies. It's bringing real harm to people in our communities. These are immigrant communities, African-American communities, folks who are sick and tired of seeing what the Trump administration is passing and harming our communities. And so there's a fire on the ground, and what you saw out of that state Senate race was emblematic of that. But right now we have a ton of exciting statewide candidates, and I think this is going to be a very important year for Texas. As soon as my primary is over, I look forward to getting out across the state to helping all of our nominees win and flip this state.
All right, Congressman Christian Menifee, thank you for being with us tonight. Coming up, lawmakers and faith leaders alike are calling on President Trump to defer to a higher power as his immigration raids continue across the United States.